I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked. On today's show, we'll be talking about how artificial intelligence is transforming the news industry, uncovering its tools and challenges, and learning about responsible AI usage for the future with one of our favorite guests, Michael Hillman. After our conversation, I'm going to talk about some practical and safe uses of AI that I use in my office today. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. In 1984, just 50 years ago, managers accustomed to working with memos on paper asked their secretaries, yes, they had them then, to print out their emails. They would then write their responses, and their secretaries typed them into the email system and sent them. In the organization where I worked, it took almost 2 years before managers began to regularly read their own emails online and begin to respond themselves. Slowly at first, then more and more rapidly, the ubiquitous memo was replaced. Today, email has been replaced in most cases by text, voicemail, chat. Those changes were virtually impossible to see in 1984. We thought the tech changes were fast then. AI changes at a much higher rate. Artificial intelligence is reshaping our world at an unprecedented pace, and nowhere is this more evident than in the news industry. We'll be exploring the evolution of AI with expert Michael Hillman, from its origins to the powerful large language models of today. Discover how AI's remarkable capacity to process and explain information is both a tool and a challenge for newsrooms around the globe. But what happens when AI picks up misinformation or hallucinates, blurring the line between fact and fiction? And how do these technologies impact our youth in ways we never anticipated? I found it useful to think about the evolution of something as simple as email. Today, it might be useful to see how AI evolved. My guest today again is Michael Hillman, who is returning, who literally wrote the U.S. Department of Energy textbook on readiness. He served as a founding member of a Department of Energy Knowledge Management Committee. But he cut his teeth in the early days of AI when the nuclear power industry was looking to use AI to improve the safety of nuclear power plants following the accident at 3 Mile Island. He was picked to head the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Probabilistic Risk Application Program, which was driven by Lisp, L-I-S-P, one of the first AI programming languages. And today he is editor of the Emmitsburg News Journal and the Woodsboro Walkersville News Journal, both local newspapers in Maryland with growing numbers of readers. Michael, welcome back to Unlocked.
Thank you.
You know, AI is in the news everywhere. We started working in AI long before today. I think it'd be useful for people to understand how AI, as we know it today, came into existence. Can you give us kind of a rough chronology?
Well, you know, the interesting thing, I was listening to your opening, and I found myself sort of smiling because I remember the introduction of the computer. You know, I remember the first time they put a PC in an NRC resident inspector's office. I was a resident up at Indian Point, New York, and the dictate that came down from the NRC was the inspectors shall not touch the computer. It was the secretaries that touched the computer, literally. And the inspectors had to handwrite their reports. They gave them to the secretary. The secretary typed them up, did a really nice thing. Then they dropped them in the U.S. mail, and they shipped them. That was the way we did it. And then the internet was born. And for those who are sitting there complaining about not being able to download a video in a movie in 3 minutes, I remember the 1200 baud. I mean, that's 1200 bits per minute um, 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 modems, and that you would log in and you would send it, and they would hit the send key, and a 4-page report would be transmitted 6 minutes later. That's how we were actually doing it. So I remember this all starting and thinking to myself, this is ludicrous. This is taking way too long. And a lot of what we were doing based upon expert knowledge about how we needed to do stuff. And when you called me and asked me to be on this podcast, I really had to do some reflection of my whole history in the area of knowledge management and expert systems. And I tried to quantify really what is, in fact, artificial intelligence. And I sent you an email, which unfortunately didn't go through, which is welcome to the internet today, was the father of the artificial intelligence current movement. He really dissed the whole belief that artificial intelligence is going to replace mankind anytime soon. And in fact, his title of this article was Artificial Intelligence is Dumber Than My Dumbest Cat. And I started laughing because I have some pretty smart cats that I think are pretty intelligent. But I do have to agree with him. We're a long, 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 long way away from artificial intelligence. I mean, the bottom line is everyone talks artificial intelligence, but we don't have artificial intelligence today. So let me work the people through where we're at.
I want to interrupt you for just a sec, Michael. Who was this father of artificial?
I'd have to go back up and pull up his email again.
Okay.
But I've got it in here. I will send it to you so that you can put it in the show notes. How's that?
I will do that. Great. Thank you.
If you think about it, you get back to the really origins. The idea of artificial intelligence, and the purpose of artificial intelligence, is for a machine to be able to make a decision equivalent to a human on information presented to it that it has never seen before. And that's really artificial intelligence. But let's step back all the way to the beginning. When you get to a discussion of an accountant who spends his time putting together all numbers, you get into statistics. And statistics will tell you certain things, but that's not artificial intelligence. It's statistics. This is what the information tells you, X, Y, and Z. And a lot of what was done initially, with an example for the programming language called Lisp, which basically spawned the current languages they call artificial intelligence languages. It was all about organizing lists, taking all these lists together, bringing them together, and saying, okay, what can we get out of it? That's not artificial intelligence. That's someone like me or someone like you being able to pull up all these lists of information, reading through them, and saying, I see something over here. I see something over here. And I need to take action based upon that. It's just good analysis. I mean, just basically your data analysis. And the program is a tool for you to help you do a data analysis. And you could go into something where Excel or Access. I don't even know if they still use Access anymore. But a lot of these data systems, you can put in rules to say, look for this. If you see this, tell me that. All the program's doing is what you tell it to do. It's not doing anything independent. And one of the things that I really the NRC came up with a program where they did an analysis. They required all nuclear power plants after 3 Mile Island to do what they call probabilistic risk analysis. What is the possibility of an accident? And based upon that, the idea would be we're going to take action based upon what are the highest risk scenarios. And so they put that together, and it all made logical sense. And then someone approached the NRC and said, well, what if one of the components that your analysis is based upon fails? And so the NRC started a program, which was the probabilistic risk application program, where they said we need to figure out if we can use some of these new artificial intelligence or these expert systems and change something in a parameter. I mean, these analysis we did at nuclear power plants were 15,000 pages. There was no way that anyone could actually sit there and read it and say, okay, let's strike this out, and now what happens? So they dumped about $4 or $5 million into 2 separate programs that would use Lisp to be able to manipulate the results, or taking something out of one table and say, okay, if we take something out of this particular table, how does the analysis go? So I remember going, and I was working with a guy at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and he did a real bare bones program. And it cost about $50,000. And then they had this Beltway bandit in Washington who spent $5 million developing this program. And so when we finally had the presentation of what one they were going to choose, I was sitting there in front of the NRC commissioners, and the question said, all right, every nuclear power plant has 2 emergency diesel generators. And that's what kicked in. It's supposed to kick in if you lose power in a reactor. And you only need 1, but they have 2. So the NRC inspector said, well, let's suppose that one of the emergency diesel generators is out of service. Where should the inspectors go to spend their time to make sure that things wouldn't go wrong? And so I'm sitting there listening to that question based upon all my knowledge, and I scribbled something on a piece of paper. And so then the guy with the $5 million program, his computer churned for about half an hour. And the guy with the $50,000 program, his things churned for about 10 minutes. And the $55 million guy comes up and says, go look at the other diesel generator. Okay. And the guy with the $50,000 program comes up and goes, yes, go look at the other diesel generator. And I handed my note to the commissioners, which I wrote as soon as I heard the question, which was, go look at the other diesel generator. So I'm sitting there going, you didn't tell me anything that I didn't know already. So the beginning of artificial intelligence really focused on not artificial intelligence, but better ways to analyze information. It didn't tell you anything. So, but let's get into the hierarchy of programs. You have stuff like Excel, all the various databases that you can give rules to. You can churn out information. It gives you something. The next level up is what they call an expert system. And an expert system is where you sit down and you have all the databases out there, but then you sit with an expert in my particular case, in nuclear industry, radiation protection, fire protection, nuclear operations, and you ask them a whole series of questions. And you ask them, then you code the answers. So what you're looking for is for the program, when you ask a question to the inspector or to the person who's the expert and they write down what their answer is, then you see how close the program can actually come to that. And you'll find that it's always missing it or is off by a certain mark, and you go back and retreat the rules that the program uses. And one of the things that we tried to do recently in the Department of Energy was to integrate all our knowledge, which meant we had to get all the data and integrate all the databases. Did that, but we still ran into problems with the fact that all we just had is a lot of data. I mean, that's just it. We just had a lot of data, but you couldn't do anything with it unless you can make some sense of it. And that's where you go into the direction of expert systems. I would submit to you today that we do not have artificial intelligence. We got some really good expert systems, but we're a long, long, long way away from artificial intelligence. And as artificial intelligence really started to take a hold, I was given this one project in the Department of Energy to integrate all the knowledge. And I was brought in to talk to people about, can we use all this information? Because for artificial intelligence to work, you have to have a lot of information, data that you can pull from. Yeah. And I watched what they were presenting. And I remember the one company that was helping me, this company called Palantir, and they were really proud about, this is our artificial intelligence program. And they were showing how they used artificial intelligence to identify targets by satellite for the Army or the Air Force to shoot missiles at. And I just looked at it and said, okay, what you've done is you programmed in all the silhouettes of all the Iranians or all the Chinese or whoever it is, vehicles, and you told the computer where to look, and so now the computer can highlight those things. That's not artificial intelligence. That's just the computer doing exactly what you've asked it to do. I don't, the interesting thing is everyone's really hyped up about the price. Think about this: the price of Nvidia stock. I think I pronounced that right. And it's artificial intelligence is getting the where we are right now in moving towards artificial intelligence is not based upon the software being able to independently think. It's based upon the fact that you're giving that software tens of thousands of computers to process information faster. And so you can bring in more information and you can process it faster. But the program's only processing what you tell it to look at. It's not independently coming up with a conclusion that a human would do without being told first what to go look at. Mm-hmm. And you look at the big push right now of all these data centers and the fact that they're recently going to start 3 Mile Island up to provide the electricity for Microsoft to fund the data centers. It gets back to all they're doing is throwing more ways to bring information together. It's like if you're an accountant and you have 4 spreadsheets and suddenly now you have 100 spreadsheets. If you use the same approach, yeah, you make it a little bit closer to where you need to be, but you're still using the same thinking process. You're not doing artificial intelligence. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, very much so. And later in the show, I'll talk about how I use artificial intelligence.
I will tell you, when you said that, how you use artificial intelligence, here's a good example of how artificial intelligence could have worked for you if it worked for you. When you had your opening screen response, mm-hmm. And you show pictures of everyone you interviewed, an artificial program would have tailored that opening screen to maybe show me or show people using artificial intelligence. Instead, you showed, good for you, all your past members that you've interviewed. AI would have come back and said, hey, Madelyn's got a thing on for artificial intelligence. Let me go get some relevant information that will highlight the subject, maybe highlight the people that she's talking to. That's artificial intelligence. But your program that you have there doesn't know to do that. So it doesn't do it because you haven't told it to do it.
That's correct.
It's artificial intelligence.
That's correct. In fact, that required 2 human heads, and lots of expertise to make that. Yeah. And I'm sorry that you weren't a part of that.
No, I
understand.
I'm fine. I struggle with listening to all the hype about artificial intelligence, and having been there from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. We get so wrapped up in what people are talking about today without actually stepping back and saying, what is in fact artificial intelligence?
Yeah. It is one of the unintended, and I do think it was unintended, use of the language. Because I think we just want it to do that. And so we call it artificial intelligence. But I don't disagree with what you've been saying. However, I do know that it is impacting how we think, how we go after information. And in particular, today, and obviously you're in the news industry, I'm really curious, your thoughts about how it impacts the news industry. I know when I go onto the internet and if I ask questions, I have to be very careful about the question that I ask and how I read the responses, because you can read the responses and assume that it's all right, and it may not be. So I will leave it there.
I'm going to go into 2 different tangents here. I'm working with a local Catholic school, and they have a STEM fair coming up. And one of the projects of the 8th graders was, does age impact your ability to recognize AI-generated images? And I sat back and I said, okay, I'll take a look at it. And they were convinced that I was too old. I mean, you got these. I don't know how old eighth graders are these days. I don't know. They all look pretty young to me. Uh, and I said, okay, run me through it. And they had a series of 10 images. I picked all 10 that were AI generated, and they were close. And it was like obvious. You can look at something, and they showed a picture of Mount Rainier, and there was a lake, and there was one had a reflection of the lake in it, the other didn't have a reflection of the lake, and you could look at the one that had the reflection of the mountain and the lake and see that was the exact inverse, but in such a way that it was like that's not how you would see it if you were at that particular height, and that's why I picked through that. And so the students just sort of looked at me, and I said, "Gotta have to do a lot better than that." The other thing I did recently is I actually challenged my students who write for my paper. And I said, I want you to do 2 articles. I want you to go into whatever AI program you use right off the bat. And I want you to ask them to write an article along the following lines. And I let them pick their own subject. And then I said, I want you to write an article about that same subject. The difference was night and day. The difference was absolutely night and day. And yes, they answered one of the questions was, write about the effects of the Civil War, right? And the AI program said, yeah, the South lost. I mean, basically that's what it was. The South lost and the North won, and slavery ended. And I'm like, and then you read the one that was written by the student, and there was more richness to it. So again, for my news reporters, I would encourage them to use, I'm going to say more of an expert system, or to use maybe an AI program that could actually go out and pull information so that they can look at it and then they can make a better case. I mean, I constantly work with all my news reporters and saying, we have the databases and all the information from all the past articles on that you can have access to. And so that when you're writing your story, you can go back 15, 20 years and you can pull all that information together. The programs out there that are advertising themselves as AI will in fact help news reporters make better articles. But the news reporters need to be smart enough to step back and say, if what's brought back doesn't make any sense, they need to be able to ignore it. So we are any newspaper today. In fact, it's interesting. I subscribe to one program for the stock exchange to follow my stocks, and they use AI generated results. And basically it says the stock went up today, da 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 da, and it's like, okay, great. You told me the stock went up. I didn't need you to tell me the stock went up. I could have just typed in the initials of the stock and seen that myself. You didn't tell me why the stock went up. You didn't tell me anything that I didn't know other than the stock went up. So what you're being given is you're just being given nothing. And so what the real live reporter does or the writer does, it's, I guess the best way to describe it, artificial intelligence is like giving you the play-by-play. This happened, just Joe threw a pass. Simon picked it up. He ran 25 yards and got tackled. Then you get into what we call the color. And in sports, you usually have the play-by-play and you have the color. The color makes sense of everything. It tells you why something's important. Artificial intelligence can't give you the color of the news. It could just tell you what happened, but not why something happened, what the effects are. We are long, and when they do try to do that, it's mediocre at best and laughable most of the time. So I think, I'm not sure what your original question was, other than, is it going to affect the news reporting for poor news sources that are what we call aggregators of information? It's a boom because you can just aggregate more things together. And so basically the old idea is, I remember the term, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, that literally, I remember talking to people back in the early days of artificial intelligence. It was garbage in, garbage out. AI today is garbage in, garbage out. Unless somehow or another you filter what you're actually going into to make better sense of what's going out, then you get a better result. But we just got garbage in, garbage out. we are so far away. Any good news source. I mean, you look at like Reuters. I mean, I go through my news sources. I use Reuters. I use Al Jazeera. Um, there's BBC. They don't use artificial intelligence. They may have all these AI programs in the back, but the reporters are the ones who make sense of it, so that you got sort of someone who's actually making the decision what they're going to put in the articles, what they're not going to put in the articles. The sites that don't want to invest in humans are just taking what's coming out of AI, the AI programs. They're aggregating garbage, and what you end up getting is garbage. And now it gets down to the reader. There's a reader, it's a buyer beware. Do you really want good, honest to God news? Or do you want garbage? And this is where we are right now in society. And everyone's hyped up about this AI, but I would challenge you, everyone, to get in Chat GPI and ask the Chat GPI or whatever AI program you could get, and ask them a question, and then write, without seeing their answer, write your own question, and then look at the two. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the surest demarcation between where we are today with AI and where we need to go.
As you say that, I think about the fact that the one thing that the AI appears to do is understand the English language. It may understand other languages. I can't assess that. I can only assess English, that it understands or not. And it can reasonably interpret what it is that I'm asking for. It may come back with the wrong information, or it may come back with what you called aggregate or not very elegant, but it does understand my question. And I'm curious because there is a power in that. I mean, I can say to Siri, go do something, and Siri will do it because it understands my language. I can go to Google now, and instead of writing in keywords, which I used to have to think about what keywords do I want to use, now I just write in an English sentence, and it's remarkable what I get back. But I do appreciate your admonition that you have to test what you're getting back from them.
And I'm going to say something because I have a horrible time with Siri, to be perfectly honest with you. It also gets back to what's the question you're asking.
Yeah.
You ask a human, or someone asks. I mean, I'm dealing with this with news reporters. A news reporter recently did a whole article on my local town has 2 EV charging stations, and you know, and so the story was about that people are complaining that there's local people going over using the EV charging stations, and that they're there all hours of the night, and that the thing's only supposed to be open for 8 hours a day. But because people are there, they leave the charging stations. It's behind the municipal building, so you can drive in. There's no locks. And so the news reporter did the whole story. She wrote the whole thing up about how they're going to change. What they're going to do is they're going to now just change the hours so people could be there 24 hours a day. Now, this is a town that is financially tight for money. And I looked at her and I said, that's great. You told me all the facts, but you didn't ask the right question. The right question is, who's paying for that electricity? Oh, and when they went back and looked, it turned out the town was paying for 3 or 4 families to charge their vehicles for free when they don't even have enough money to pay for upgrades to their water system. And it's costing them $1,500 a month for 3 rich families. I said, that's the story. That's the question you needed to ask. So yes, and again, when you ask Google to do X, Y, and Z, Google is going to still change things based upon what all the databases it has can pull together, but it's also going to prioritize based on what rules Google and some of them behind the scenes says this is what we need to look at, this is what we don't need to look at. And you also don't know what databases Google's not looking at. Mm-hmm. So, yes, but it gets back to the rules that were being used to help sort through information are getting better. The rules are getting better. But that's not artificial intelligence. It's the expert system. We're looking at expert systems where someone may ask that question and then look at what Google returns and say, okay, we missed this, we missed this, we missed this. When someone asks this particular question, this is where we're going to modify it. So you're just asking the computer to look up a rule that's been asked or programmed by a human to say, if you get this, go do that. That's not AI.
And you're right about that it has some preset notions. For example, when it does respond, Google will also suggest that there are like a half a dozen other questions that are commonly asked in relationship to it. And then you can drill down if you wish to. And then it finally will give you the links as it would originally have done. Because when originally Google only gave you links. So it does eventually give you that response.
And I've seen those myself where I go in and ask something. I'll ask for, sure, give me an image of a mother disciplining a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get all these other people have asked for this, other people have asked for this, other people. That's nothing more than a rule. What are similar statements people gave for that? That's you all program that in. I mean, if you think about it, the human mind, I wanted to actually do a research, I didn't do it yet, of how many billions of things are happening in your brain at any one particular time. I mean,
it's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And artificial intelligence needs to come to that. And even with all the major data centers that are being built, I don't even think we come to a fraction of what the average human mind can actually process. And therefore, that's why I agree with one statement that AI right now is dumber than a cat. And I love cats. I got 8 cats, everyone is. So don't get me wrong. I love my cats. And I think I got some really good smart ones. But, I mean, I have a horse, and horses aren't known for being the brightest in the world, but my horse has learned how to communicate with me. When I bring him into a stall and I want him to do something, he doesn't want to do it. He's learned to tap his right foot. He literally will go out and tap his right foot and say, I can't do this. And I'm a little bit smarter than him, and I realize that's what he needs to do. But that's the degree of communications that a horse and I have been able to work out. AI, all it is just a lot of computers processing a lot more information using rules.
Okay, so let's work with that assumption, that definition. It still does not respond to my concern, which is for a writer in your newspaper, as an editor in your of a newspaper, what are the guidelines you need to be operating within so that you can assure that when you're putting something out, it gives value to the public?
My guideline would be, do you agree? Have you read what you're presenting to me, and do you agree? I actually recently, since you and I last talked, I've now hired created a new in-between management position called Does It Make Sense? She's the Does It Make Sense editor. So you got the news reporters who pull all their information together. Mm-hmm. And this is what I used to do. I used to read and basically say, okay, you didn't ask the next question. You didn't ask the next question. I now have someone who actually reads all the articles, independent. They're not there from the beginning. And she's like, does the story hang together? Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't make sense, then they go back and ask the next questions. Yes, but here's your thing. If you're a newspaper and all you're interested in doing is filling up space. I mean, the idea, I need to get word counts, and I run into this a lot. People every article needs to be 500 words, and sometimes you only have 300 words, so then you fill it up with useless words. Artificial intelligence is going to give you focus on the word count. When you read an article, you're going to see it's mostly a word count article as opposed to a content article. Mm-hmm. The rules that I would have for my people is, I want you to look at all the data, and then I want you to give me the color, not the play-by-play. You have to put the play-by-play and tell what happened, but then you also need to do the why, the where, or mostly the why that happened. And if you don't do that, I'm going to reject your article. I mean, when I finish reading an article, I want to understand why do we put it in the paper? Why is that in the paper? What do you want people to walk away with doing? Cheap websites, cheap newspapers are going to just give you the play-by-play. They're not going to care about the quality. They're not going to care about the accuracy of what they're reporting. They just want to fill something up so that they can have space, something to put around the ads. But what's going to be the downside of that is everyone who's watching this probably has seen one way or another what we call the local merchandiser, something that you get in the mail or you get dropped at your mailbox, on the ground that has a bunch of ads and some useless content in it. That's going to be where the newspapers that focus on AI, people are going to start to walk away from those because they're not telling them something useful, readable, that is actionable. It's just throwing random information. In a lot of cases that you're going to look at it and you're going to look around your world and say, this is not what I see in my world. As opposed to the newspapers and the internet sources and the TV news programs that actually put the human. They use the tools, the data aggregation. I don't even call them AI. The data aggregation tools that we got right now to help them write more cogent stories, something that are actionable, something that make you think. So I'm not worried about what happens when AI actually can start to think like me, because I'll be dead, and so I don't have to worry about that. But it gets back to, you had an opening conversation about the boy who supposedly committed suicide because his AI generated girlfriend. I don't know what to say about that other than, where were the parents? I mean, that's a social media type issue where why do parents, increasingly, you hear a lot in the news today where schools are now telling people they can't bring phones to school anymore, that they have to focus on schoolwork. I had someone the other day said, why aren't you on Facebook? And I'm like, I don't want to be on Facebook. If someone wants to send me something, they send it to me. They email it to me. They can pick up the phone and they can talk to me. But social media, it has no value to me at all. It's just people spouting what they think without any quality or verification of where we're at. What we're focusing on now is a lot of echo chamber news. Mm-hmm. People just being reinforced what you want to hear as opposed to what really needs to get done. And I think I grew up on the Walter Cronkite, Peter Jennings, those news reporters who basically, they had no political agenda. They told you what was going on in the world and why it was important. Today, you tune into a TV program and it's focused on telling you what you want to hear. Yeah. And a lot of these data aggregation programs are going to tell you what you want to hear as opposed to what you need to hear.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, that when I asked you about guidelines, you said one of the questions that you ask the reporter is, do they agree? But the next question was, does it make sense? And as I heard you say that, I realized what you are looking for is the judgment of the writer. And if there's one thing that is something that we as humans contribute, it's judgment. You may not agree with my final conclusion, but if I at least know that you have committed and done some thought about why it's important to you. I liked that a lot. I remember often saying to management, you pay me for my judgment. So right. Give me an opportunity to use that judgment.
Well, and again, it could be, your conclusion could be against your instincts. You think what happened is wrong, but you still have to write what happened. You can't. There's a difference between spinning the news to your outcome.
Yeah.
As opposed to, here's everything and this is the result of what you're seeing. Mm-hmm. That's where the value added comes in. That's where the actual natural intelligence, I'm not going to call it artificial, the natural intelligence of the brain says, this is why you need to read something. This is why you need to think about what this is.
Okay, I want to also now go back to your reference to that New York Times article, and I'll just mention this. It was in the New York Times on October the 23rd of this year. The mother of a 14-year-old Florida boy says he became obsessed with a chatbot on character AI before his death, where he literally shot himself because he wanted to be with this imaginary person. There are times in our lives when we don't have the experience to see what is real.
Can I stop you right there? I'm going to ask you a question. And this is what I'd ask my news reporter. You just said something. Have you actually seen that person's chat image? You seen it?
They have shown portions of
Her.
of his communication with his imaginary sister.
Okay. So what does she look like?
They didn't quote those. Here's an example.
Did they show you? So here's the thing. I'm dealing with you if you're a news reporter. I'm talking.
All right. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They have one. Oops, there it is. One example.
But do you have a picture of who she is?
No.
So, my question to my reporter is, how do you make a story out of this if you don't even know? So if it's just an online dialogue, okay, I'm not sure where to go with that. If it was an AI image and it was perfect and it looked like your sister,
no, it wasn't that. It was a dialogue that was between the teenager and this bot that they had created.
I think there's my comment with that, there's a bigger issue here. It has nothing to do with the bot.
Okay.
There's a bigger issue here. There's something fundamentally wrong with that kid. I hate to sound horrible.
Could be.
This is, you shouldn't be blaming AI. You shouldn't be blaming the bot. There is something else wrong. And this is where you need to basically take action based upon what the real underlying issue is. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No. That's okay. Actually, it calls to mind an earlier thought that I had as you were talking about asking the right question. As a researcher, I've done years of research. You have to ask the right question. And right. I recently read a book called The Sources of Power by Gary Klein. And his whole first chapter is how he defines his research. And as he began the research, he realized he was asking the wrong questions. And so they had to peel out and go to one's substantive.
When I first heard the story about the kid, again, I was someplace and I heard it. And the first thing that entered my mind is, okay, this must have been some type of image on a screen that the kid was talking to and interacting with. And I was thinking along that line. Now you just showed me it was a chat. I mean, this is so different from a chat with a pedophile on a kid's platform trying to seduce a 12-year-old. It's the same thing. And this is where it gets back to the parents. Why is someone spending all their time on a chat room when they could be out?
This was a chat, but not with a person.
It was I know. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It gets back to buyer beware. The parents. I mean, in fact, I don't know how to say it. I have this. It would sound really horrible, but I have very little sympathy for a parent who comes and says, "My kid got addicted to a chat interaction." In fact, I have one of my students who rides horses with me. Now that she's riding, taking lessons, she's given up all her online chat programs. She's more focused on coming out, riding horses, interacting with horses, and her mother. So like, oh, thank God, I've gotten her off of it. And my comment was, why did you let her to get on with it to begin with? I mean, there's no value in these dialogues. I have one of my writers who's constantly coming back to me, and he's watching these videos, and I'm there like, but do the videos reflect real life? They're podcasts and stuff like that, but do they reflect what you see every day? And he goes, well, no, not really. Then why are you watching them? Well, because I have nothing better to do. I said, well, that's your problem. Go find something better to do that's going to add more value to your life and to the world, as opposed to sitting in front of the computer.
I think you've just answered my last question that I was going to ask you, which was how can we use AI with care?
Again, I'm going to go back and say we don't have AI today. We don't have it. We have what we call expert systems where you're dumping massive amount of the computers to aggregate millions, if not billions, of pieces of data, um, and then they give a more accurate returns, but they're not telling you why it's important. They're just giving you the play-by-play and all the information. They haven't, you know, again, it gets back to where AI really becomes AI is when you expose it to something that it's never seen before, and it comes up with the same decision a human would for something they've never seen before. When you get to that point, that you got artificial intelligence. We don't have that today. All we have is here's everything we've looked at. Here are all our experiences. Here's how we responded. So if you see that in the data, give us that type of information back. It's not thinking for itself. It's just replicating rules that we've taught it to use. That's not artificial intelligence. That's called an expert system. We are not there anywhere.
Michael Hillman, you are always argumentative, and I love it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for this. I think it has opened my mind even more, and I've done a lot of work on understanding this myself, and I'm sure it has for my audience as well. And I kind of am thinking now about what I'm about to say about how I use AI in my own work, and I think you're going to laugh because it's all using it as expert systems. But let's see what that is. But again, thank you so much.
Okay.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. When we plan a show with a guest, there are 33 steps from start to finish. It includes everything from booking a guest to broadcasting the show to transcribing the video and much more. I keep that number 33 in mind. It's what drove us to experiment with AI, even when we knew we would have to climb a learning curve. In June of 2023, we began using AI to transcribe our shows using a specialized application. Then, when ChatGPT was announced as a stable platform in August of 2024, we immediately began exploring how we could benefit from what looked like an amazing additional tool and assistant to those 33 steps. The very first application we developed with it was to create timestamps for the show on YouTube. Through that specific use of AI, we learned how to tell the AI assistant what we wanted it to do, or in other words, create a prompt for AI, the critical questions that were sufficient for AI to understand what we were asking it to do. And I will tell you that the afternoon that I spent with my, with my intern figuring this out was a great deal of fun because AI didn't do what we thought it was going to do. And then we asked it a different way and it still didn't do it. And then finally, we cracked it. We were able to find, or I should say, the AI was able to identify the timestamps for our videos. And we found that what we had to do was say, would you please tell us every time the conversation changes topics? Very simple. We also use it for writing marketing materials. Now, I've written 5 books, but I never consider myself to be a proficient writer. I use editors, and I rewrite a lot. One thing that I find very hard to do is to write marketing material in that kind of style. And so I write what I want to say, I give it to my AI, and I say, please turn this into some marketing language. And it does it surprisingly well. I always have to do some editing, but you see, it begins with my content, and it's just changing the style. So that's been successful. We also use it to summarize our shows. Again, we give it the transcription and we say, please give us a single paragraph. And that helps us prepare what we want to post. Now for the big thing that I just was thrilled that we were able to crack. It creates a project plan for us. Remember those 33 steps? Well, I asked two people independently of each other if they could take those 33 steps and create a project list, project plan for a guest when they are booked. Neither of them could do it. We handed it to AI, and lo and behold, it produces a beautiful project plan for every guest that comes on. But we've had some failures. I also produce something called mental espresso, which means you go through the video and you say, right there, that speaker, that guest said something. Everybody should hear that. And they said it in less than a minute even. And we pull that clip out and we create a mental espresso. I've talked about that before on the show. AI is not very good. In fact, it can't do it at all. I also wanted it to summarize some things. I had hundreds of strategies that I had garnered from the literature, etc. And I wanted it to summarize it into about maybe 10 or 12 categories. AI couldn't do it. Now, it could be that I didn't know how to tell it the right question, to give it the right question. But nonetheless, I could do it with a person in about 5 minutes, and it might take them 2 days to do it, but it would be done. But I couldn't get AI to do it. We've learned I've learned some major things. The first was that I want to control the information that AI uses because I want to be certain that it will produce correct results. In other words, I use it only when I can confirm its accuracy. So to do that, I give it the information and ask it to work only with that information. You have to create the right prompt, the right question, and that takes time and trying it again and again to get it right. And the good news is that AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't even get cranky. Now, the third lesson I've discovered is that you should treat your AI assistant with respect for what it can do. Because it's learning your style from you. So why not treat it well, and then it will treat you well. And I will tell you that in my experience, it works. As I said, so far, major lesson. I haven't been able to get AI to fully understand complex concepts, and that may reflect my limitation. But after listening to Michael, I think it's AI. So if you're still wondering about AI and want to study more about it before you use it, or as you use it, I recommend a book called Co-Intelligence. I've talked about it in the past, by Ethan Mollick. In it, he describes many other ways in which he has played with AI and experimented with its potential. It's a very interesting and engaging book. So even from my limited use of AI, I've concluded its potential is vast, but you have to know what you're doing. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. And if you have a question you'd like to explore with me, write to Madelyn at madelynblair.com. And by the way, if you have tried to do so in the recent past and your email bounced, I apologize for the inconvenience. We had recently shifted from one provider to another, and it took time to root out all the transition problems. Now, if you're a subscriber or if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, click the like button. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. That helps me, and it helps others who are looking for this content. So thanks for your help in doing so. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.